Herzlich willkommen zu Bitcoin Insights mit Philipp. In diesem Podcast vertiefe ich die Themen meines wöchentlichen Bitcoin Insights Newsletters.
Hey Dennis.
Philip.
Great to have you here on Bitcoin Insights.
Absolutely, glad to be here with you.
We are right now in San Salvador, El Salvador, and you can see it's raining.
Yeah.
But it's still beautiful. It's still a great conference. But as usual, we have right now the block time 870,622. And first question, is this your first time here in El Salvador and the first time on adopting Bitcoin?
It is. First time in El Salvador, first time at an adopting Bitcoin event, and very excited to be here to see what's going on in the country and to, of course, hang out with all of my fellow Bitcoiners.
What do you think? Do you like it so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible country. It feels like a very exciting time. I've said a few times now that I think we're really watching an underdeveloped country develop in real time. I mean, there's infrastructure projects all over the country. They're building left and right. There's a lot of investment coming into the country. So very exciting time for the country.
That's true. And I think a lot of other countries can learn from it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So for those who may not know you, can you briefly introduce yourself and share what inspired you to focus on advancing Bitcoin and especially advancing Bitcoin adoption through politics?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I found Bitcoin in 2017. Very quickly, I fell in love with the technology. I originally discovered it because a friend of mine said that it's perfectly anonymous internet money. And so I started to say, no way, that's not possible. So I started to study it pretty intensely just so I could prove him wrong. Yeah. And eventually I did prove him wrong. It's not perfectly anonymous, although there are certainly privacy enhancements. But while I was in there trying to prove my friend wrong, I found so many things about the technology that I fell in love with, especially at that time. I was really concerned about financial inclusion and banking the unbanked. And I saw Bitcoin as a real solution to be able to, maybe not completely solve that problem, but an actual step towards the right direction. There are 2 billion people globally who don't have access to financial services, the ones that we experience, in the West or in developed countries. And, the next Einstein could come from one of these countries where they don't have access to financial services, but he might have never been able to buy his first textbook. He or her might have been able to go to university. And so we are totally missing out on the human potential of these 2 billion people all across the world. So Bitcoin is a solution for that. That's very clear. Bitcoin enables anybody, anywhere in the world to have access to it as long as they have a connection to the internet. And of course, with global internet adoption and the availability of the internet growing worldwide, it's truly become a technology that virtually anyone in the world can access. And so that's how I found Bitcoin, quickly fell in love with its capability to provide financial services. And right away, I was like, you know what? I need to do something in Bitcoin, right? The moment anyone really starts to understand the power of Bitcoin, they see how much potential and opportunity there is, and so they try to jump right into doing something. So I tried to start mining Bitcoin. I was mining Bitcoin in my basement in 2017, and I ran into a bunch of problems. I ran into too much heat, too much noise, very expensive power. So I had to try to innovate around how to improve the heat in the basement, right? I built a giant container and fit it to my basement door and was pushing all the heat outside. And then I had foam inside to deal with the noise and was negotiating my power rate with the power company. So for the first time in my life, I felt driven to innovate with the technology. And I realized in that moment, if I'm feeling driven to innovate, then I feel that there are probably people all across the world that are being driven to innovate. And that was really impactful for me. Now, I only found Bitcoin just before the 2018 crash, so I wasn't able to scale my Bitcoin mining operation up and had to wait a little bit longer. But I continued to research and study Bitcoin. And then in 2021, when Bitcoin came back, I jumped onto Clubhouse, jumped onto Twitter Spaces, and started to talk about Bitcoin. It became somewhat popular for speaking about Bitcoin, launched a podcast, and eventually you go forward a few more years as I'm talking about Bitcoin, I'm helping people to have a better understanding of Bitcoin, trying to provide whatever value I can to the space. I just realized that there was going to be a real significant need for Bitcoiners to engage politically, and I wasn't seeing it take place. And in fact, in the space, you probably know, most Bitcoiners are like, no, we don't want to do politics, we don't want to do government. Bitcoin is separate from government. And what I say to that is that Bitcoin might be separate from government, it might be separate from politics, but me and you are not. Me and you still are living in the real world, beholden to the laws that are created by the governments around us. And I really realized in that moment that we needed to become much more politically active if we wanted to see our communities, our states, our countries adopt the technology. And I think El Salvador is a very good example of what you can accomplish when you engage politically. So eventually, I'm yelling into the void, telling everyone they need to be more politically active and more engaged. And I just didn't see it taking place the way I thought it needed to. So eventually, I launched Satoshi Action Fund in June of 2022, and we got to working with state lawmakers and regulators across the country, educating them on Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining so they could see the value of it, and then eventually crafting public policy, putting it in front of those lawmakers so they could pass those bills into law.
Yeah, nice. You said it like we in Europe or US, we have like a really great financial system and like easy access to banks and credits and all of that stuff. But like still billions of people who don't have that.
That's right.
And still we are saying like there's so many Germans who are saying we don't need Bitcoin and we have banks and we have all of that. And we are really missing out for all of those people who don't have that. And now we have countries like El Salvador who are going as the first Bitcoin country in this direction. And I think it's a great progress. And you're doing a lot of stuff in the United States. And so what progress have you had with your team together? And what did you already achieve in driving Bitcoin-friendly regulation in the USA?
Yeah, so we've had a ton of success. We've been able to impact or educate over 2,000 lawmakers, some of them through direct engagement. And a lot of the lawmakers that we've been able to directly engage, when we tell them what can be accomplished with Bitcoin, they're kind of surprised. They're like, well, I thought it was for criminals and for money laundering, and there was no use case for Bitcoin. So when we sit them down and explain the potential of Bitcoin, and particularly Bitcoin mining as an energy infrastructure tool, they quickly say, okay, well, what do I do now? What can I do to attract Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining to my state? How do I provide a stable regulatory framework for these companies? And so that's when we turn around and we say, okay, here's our model policy that you can introduce and pass into law. In our first year of introducing legislation in 2023, we were able to introduce our right to mine bill in 7 states, and eventually we passed it into law in 2 states, in Montana and Arkansas. And that was a huge win because we had just got started, and immediately we were seeing some of these wins be secured. Now, part of it is because, I'm a public figure, so I can attract attention to the work we're doing, and people want to listen to what we're doing. But ultimately, there's the team members behind Satoshi Action that really are the ones that put us in a position to score these policy wins. So we're very fortunate to have people who have decades of experience in the political space helping to guide our policy efforts. And then from there, because of the wind at our back, and listen, we did that in the middle of the FTX collapse. There was these lawmakers, a lot of them were like, wait, Bitcoin is still a thing? Like it still exists? Like you guys are still trying to make this happen? So despite those negative headwinds, we were able to pass those 2 bills into law. And then if you transport to the next legislative cycle, we had those wins carrying us at our back. And also, there was a little bit better, I would say, some time between when the FTX collapsed. And so our second legislative cycle in 2024, this year, we were able to pass 2 more bills into law, which were much more expanded. So it wasn't just right to mine, it was right to mine, right to self-custody, right to run a node, right to peer-to-peer transactions, and of course, a few other regulatory changes that helped to improve the landscape for Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining in those states. And that was a huge win as well, because we didn't just say, oh, well, we passed right to mine, let's pass it again. We dramatically expanded the policy and got 2 more states online in Oklahoma and Louisiana. And in Louisiana, we even also banned CBDCs and their usage in the state as much as we possibly could. You can't do an outright ban, but you can essentially hinder CBDCs, which is, I think, a really important parallel issue to Bitcoin that a lot of Bitcoiners care about or should care about to suppress, so to speak.
Yeah.
Now, though, we are on a totally new trajectory, and because of the outcome of the election, not just because Trump was pro-Bitcoin and he won, but we also see an entirely new set of pro-Bitcoin members of Congress coming into Washington, D.C. And for the first time in American history, we will have a majority pro-Bitcoin Congress. And we also saw in the last election, 2 sitting U.S. senators lose their election to pro-Bitcoin candidates. And in Ohio, I think it's really important because in Ohio, Sherrod Brown, U.S. Senator in the United States, very powerful, chair of Senate banking, really strong ally with Elizabeth Warren, was absolutely demolished by a totally brand new outsider that came up and said, I'll support Bitcoin. A ton of money was dumped into that race, and Sherrod Brown was ousted. So, Trump gets a lot of the attention, but the reason why we're going to see so many great positive movements for Bitcoin in the U.S. is because there were all these seats in Congress that were flipped with pro-Bitcoiners.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see like that Trump made it a topic for his election campaign. Bitcoin, like we have now a new election in February in Germany, and I don't think that any of the potential chancellors are saying anything about Bitcoin whatsoever. And now Trump, like the leader of the free world, is making this a campaign topic and talking quite a lot about it. Yeah, he's doing other stuff in cryptocurrency too, so I'm not pretty sure if he's like totally Bitcoin understanding, but at least it's on the roadmap. I'm really looking forward what is coming from the US and maybe then coming to Europe too. We will see. But like, what has been the most significant challenges you faced when you're trying to do like influencing policymakers into Bitcoin-related topics?
Really, the biggest problem that we face is there's just such a lack, or there at least has been, it's changing now, but there was such a lack of good information and good educational materials, and also a total lack of academic level research supporting a lot of the claims that we make. And so at Satoshi Action, we're really dedicated to developing better educational materials, developing one-pagers that help to quickly, succinctly educate lawmakers on the benefits of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. And also, additionally, we are working to develop academic level research. And we have been able to craft and draft and submit about 10 or 12 different pieces of academic level research. And 6 of those pieces have been accepted into peer-reviewed journals, with one of them making its way into a top 2% journal. So the reason why that matters, a lot of us in the Bitcoin space, we don't really need the academic research to help us understand Bitcoin. We're looking at it, we're understanding it, but lawmakers, they have very little time to research Bitcoin. There's a lot of issues they have to care about, and so if you can deliver to them academic, credible evidence-backed research that makes it into the peer-reviewed journals, it's like a shortcut to them saying, oh, okay, well, if it's not just you saying it, there's a third-party journal with independent reviewers that are saying, you know what, this is good research, and we agree that these are true facts about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. So that's been a really powerful tool for combating some of the FUD or the misinformation around Bitcoin.
Yeah, there was quite a lot FUD. Like, I remember the article which was not written but like published by the World Economic Forum in 2017. Like Bitcoin mining will need so much energy in the year 2020 than the whole world in the year 2017. So that was totally crazy, and a lot of years it was always the same thing. It's in the head of so many people, especially in Germany. I don't know how it's in the US, but still in Europe, they are saying like Bitcoin is destroying the world. But recently, like the last 1 or 2 years, all of the studies, they're going the opposite way. They're saying how good Bitcoin mining is for the environment, because it's like a fast forward track to renewable energies.
Yes.
And like, especially in the US, like the energy companies, they're working together with the mining pools to like level the grid, and like if there's too much usage, they go down, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So like stabilizing the grid, which is really good, which only Bitcoin can do it on this level at the moment. Otherwise, I think in Texas there would be so many blackouts and problems. So I think studies are catching up with the reality, and the FUD is going a bit down, and like what is really happening is going up.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. In one of the papers that we played a major part in was Bitcoin's carbon footprint revisited, and that was a paper that essentially said that Bitcoin mining is a powerful tool for enhancing clean energy. Wind and solar are intermittent energy assets. They are very regionally dependent. Bitcoin mining can be placed anywhere, theoretically. Anywhere there's an internet connection. With Starlink, that's pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
But with wind and solar, they have to be placed where the wind is blowing strong or the sun is shining bright for them to be effective. So the problem with that is that's usually far away from demand centers. It's far away from city centers where there is the demand to be able to support the generation. So what's happened is they've had to build these very large, high voltage transmission lines, and unfortunately, those transmission lines have been very difficult to build. Also, batteries. Batteries are very expensive. They're a great solution. They're very expensive, Numbers are getting better on those. I think batteries are going to play a big part in the future. But I talk to renewable energy generators around the world, so I know exactly how they're thinking about these things. Some of them are bullish, so to speak, and they say, oh, batteries will be here in 3 years, 4 years, it'll solve all of our problems. The smart renewable energy generators, the ones that are honest with themselves, know that the problems that are inherent in renewable energy are not going away for decades, probably, at least a decade. And so going back to the transmission lines, though, what happens when you build a renewable energy generation plant far away from a demand center and you don't have the transmission line? They have to curtail or waste a lot of the energy that they could have delivered. And that really hurts the economics of wind and solar generation. So what you can do is you can put a Bitcoin mine directly next to some of these wind and solar sites, helping to monetize all that excess generation until the transmission lines come in. And then maybe you scale down the Bitcoin mining site when the transmission comes in. Maybe you scale it down when the batteries come in. But ultimately, Bitcoin mining is a clear solution to monetize all that excess generation and ultimately support some of these renewable energy companies.
Yeah, and like usually politicians, we had it like 2.5 years ago, in light of the markets of crypto assets regulation, that the European Parliament, they wanted to ban Bitcoin mining because of the high energy consumption. But what we did was lobbying and educating the decision makers what will actually happen if you ban it in Europe. Those who are using renewable energy from solar, water, hydro, they're moving maybe to Kazakhstan, where the CO2 consumption will be much higher. So you don't have positive effects in the world. So if you do clear education of policymakers, of politicians, they understand that, and then if they have the right information, they will make informed decisions, and usually it's the right decisions. So I think that's why lobbying is so important, because it's we don't just have to educate the society or the public, but the policymakers, the politicians as well.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this earlier today, right? It was there's a huge just lack of understanding of the technology. It's not necessarily that they think that they hate Bitcoin and think it's horrible. It's just that they're getting all this misinformation and they don't have the time or the resources to really study it. So that's why it's so important for groups like yours and others to go in there and help educate. And you've said it. You said once you go in and you explain what's happening with Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, they're like, okay, yeah, I get it. This makes sense. It's very easy to make sense of it. The problem is there's just not enough Bitcoiners going out there to educate lawmakers, or there wasn't in the past. I think it's certainly been dramatically improving, and I think that's why the work that you do and others in the space in Europe and across the world to educate lawmakers is so important, because once you get in the door and you educate them, it's very easy for them to understand the power of Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's true. So you're sometimes being criticized for your way of doing announcements, especially on Twitter. How do you handle those criticisms, and what would you say to those skeptics?
Well, listen. First of all, if you don't have any skeptics, you're probably not doing enough. You're not scoring enough wins, right? There's always going to be people that don't like what you do, and you can take Elon as an example. Like, how many people are catching rockets out of the middle of the sky, but people don't like his approach to Twitter. So, and maybe people have the same perception of me, and that they don't like my approach to Twitter, but it's working and it's effective. It gets the message out. For 3 years, the funny part was I tried the other way out. They're like, oh, just do the work and stay quiet. I tried that for 3 years. I passed law after law, and we barely got any attention for it. But now that I'm announcing that the wins are coming, people are paying a lot more attention. Lawmakers are paying a lot more attention. And so when that win comes, there's a whole new community of people that have become aware of those legislative efforts. I know, based on Twitter's analytics, that we have more attention to the strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation that came out of Pennsylvania than anything we've ever done in the history of Satoshi Action, and it's not even close. And part of that is because you do have to say, hey, I know people think it's marketing, but you have to market what you're doing. Otherwise, people are not going to be aware of it. When you secure a win for Bitcoin, everybody should know that, so that others are going to want to secure wins for Bitcoin as well, or try to work and copy the progress that you've made. And we are seeing that. After introducing this legislation in Pennsylvania, we've been able to secure not only 1, not only 2, 3, 4, but up to 10 states to be able to introduce strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation. And that's because they're seeing how popular it is. They're seeing how exciting it is. And beyond that, we're also talking to policymakers in 4 different countries now as well, who are like, wow, this is exciting. We want to get on board. And these aren't just politicians trying to score political points. These are also Bitcoin politicians who care about Bitcoin. And they've become more aware of our work because of announcing the announcement, so to speak.
Yeah. So it seems like more and more, I wouldn't say more and more, like that countries are buying Bitcoin, maybe, hopefully. Um, do you see it as inevitable that most of governments will eventually start buying Bitcoin for the treasuries? Or is it something that will happen only like in selected, forward-thinking countries? What do you think?
I mean, I'm very bullish, optimistic on Bitcoin. So I think eventually it makes sense for every country in the world, every state in the world to have a little bit of Bitcoin. A lot of countries have gold reserves for this very reason, to protect, to give themselves another tool and to protect themselves from any type of economic downturn. So I think that the same reason people hold gold reserves is the same reason why countries will hold Bitcoin reserves eventually. But also beyond that, the reason why countries will want to have access to Bitcoin is because Bitcoin isn't just an asset, it's also a payment network. And for the first time ever, we have a truly incredible payment network that can give people all across the world access to the financial system. And it really prevents anyone from being kept out. The systems that we have today, they're very controlled, and we're entering also a bipolar world. We have SWIFT, and now we have BRICS coming. Well, what happens when SWIFT and BRICS don't want to work together? I think Bitcoin can be the interoperable layer between a lot of these countries who might not want to do business in the future, or might want to suppress and keep other people out. So in a way, governments are going to want access to Bitcoin as an asset, but they're also going to want Bitcoin so they can participate in that global payment system.
Yeah. So if countries are now starting to buy Bitcoin, how do you think they will finance it? And like, how should they maybe do it? So I think either you increase taxes, you reduce spending, you reallocate assets, like you sell gold, for example, to buy Bitcoin. What do you think will happen?
I think that a lot of countries are going to come. This is the one area where I think countries are going to approach it in different ways. They already do buy bonds, they buy treasuries. Some countries buy stocks. They have gold, and so they may take a portion of those other assets and allocate it into Bitcoin. Some may raise taxes. Some may debase their currency. I'm not really in the business of telling other states and other countries how they should do that. But ultimately, I'd hope they do it in the most, efficient way possible without raising the tax burden on the people.
Yeah. You know that the ECB, the European Central Bank, or bought MicroStrategy and therefore like indirectly bought Bitcoin.
I didn't know that, actually.
I'm not sure like if it's because they're buying stocks anyway, and MicroStrategy is probably in the S&P 500, so they have to buy it kind of.
Maybe, yeah.
But like you could say that the ECB is indirectly holding Bitcoin.
Well, that would be breaking news to me. So but this is one thing I've said too is the reason why I think government should own a little bit of Bitcoin for my own personal, benefit is because, and the benefit of all Bitcoiners, is that if they have a little bit of Bitcoin, they're part of the Bitcoin community, they're part of the Bitcoin ecosystem, and it's really important that incentives are aligned. So when other countries, just like when BlackRock started buying Bitcoin, right? Like now BlackRock is a Bitcoin company. And so when these large companies, these large governments are buying Bitcoin, they become a part of the Bitcoin ecosystem, and then we're all looking for how we can advance Bitcoin together.
Yeah. So let's say a government like Germany is buying Bitcoin. How can citizens then profit from this?
That's a great question. We talked about this too behind the scenes. I care a lot about the population or the populace benefiting directly from Bitcoin. So in a way, there are benefits without, if a government buys Bitcoin, I mentioned it earlier, it gives them another tool in the toolbox to protect from instability or inflation. But I want the individuals to benefit as well. So I'd love to see programs set up where governments are helping to secure Bitcoin on behalf of the people. And maybe it's a retirement system, maybe it's Social Security, maybe it's through pensions. But we want to see more of those individuals directly benefit from Bitcoin when their governments are getting involved, not just the government getting more rich. Because as you said, in Germany, the government is very rich and the people don't have quite as much money in comparison. So I'd love to see that flow the other direction.
Yeah. Like in Norwegian, for example, they have like for many decades a very good investment fund, which is, I think, highly profitable. And they're investing in different stocks mostly. And I think as a country like Germany, you have to focus on doing something like that, but not just with stocks and gold, but with Bitcoin too. So it could be like a diversified portfolio. And then in the end, it will help all of the citizens, right? Like if you have assets like Bitcoin, and in the end you can say that's something we as a German Bitcoin Association have to work for too. For example, let's say you want to buy real estate and you have Bitcoin. Right now in Germany, you can't say, here, that's my capital in Bitcoin. They don't like accept it like it would be in cash or in other assets. So you have to say, I have a lot of money in Bitcoin, so the interest rate goes down. So this is something we have, for example, to do in Germany. And if the state has a lot of Bitcoin too, then it would be the same, right? If they have to borrow money, you can say we have so much Bitcoin, so the interest rate for the whole country is going down. So I think I'm not sure like how we can change this with like which policies we have to change. Or is it like just internal bank policies the banks can determine? But I think this is something we have to work on in the future, because in the end there are so many Bitcoiners right now in my generation and they want to buy real estate, for example, and maybe they need a fiat credit, then it would help them if the bank would accept Bitcoin.
As collateral and
Yes, as collateral.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. I think we're headed there. You know, Bitcoin is, it is pristine collateral.
Yeah.
It is the best collateral in the world. There's no counterparty risk when you engage in Bitcoin, and so hopefully in the future banks will acknowledge this. I think we are headed that direction. You know, the terms that you can get for giving Bitcoin to a bank or a lender are getting better and better every year. So it's just a matter of time that banks start to trust and appreciate Bitcoin for what it is. That's just a matter of those banks getting more comfortable and feeling like Bitcoin has been de-risked. And I think that's also probably another reason why it's important that governments get into the game of buying Bitcoin, because that will, in the eyes of the banks, I mean, if governments are buying this stuff, it significantly de-risks Bitcoin in their eyes.
Yeah. So you focused heavily or probably mainly on the United States for the past. Do you have plans to assist like either politicians or associations in other countries such as Europe, so that they adopt like similar Bitcoin policies like you did already in the United States?
Yeah, definitely. We are very interested in engaging internationally to help where we can. At the end of the day, you know, we picked the policies in the U.S. that we felt were not only achievable wins, but were able to make progress for Bitcoin in the policy realm. And we felt like we can also turn around and help other parts of the world determine what those policies might be for them. We don't want to tell other parts of the world, we don't want to tell El Salvador what to do, we don't want to tell Germany what to do, but we feel that we've come up with a model and a strategy for how to fund and also implement a lot of the policies that we've tried to get across the finish line. And one of the things I've noticed, because I operate in states all across the country, and those are different jurisdictions, they have different approaches to policy, they have different cultures around politics. And so we have been able to operate at Satoshi Action in a variety of different demographics, variety of different political cultures. And so that's put us in a good position to help see how that model works in different jurisdictions. So we feel that we can help implement that model in other parts of the world. And really what we want to do is we want to find other people that are running associations and that are in a good position. Like, I'm not trying to find, you know, random followers or volunteers on Twitter to go run these associations. I think we should find smart people like yourself, like others who already know what they're doing. They already know how to be effective, and just give them that extra boost to be able to get the things across the finish line that matter to the people of their country.
Yeah. So what role do you see for international collaboration for nations when it comes to Bitcoin adoption? And how can countries maybe align their policies for mutual benefit?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're gonna want to see countries come together and figure out what's working and try to help each other collaborate towards positive outcomes. You know, countries do that all the time already, and so I'm excited for a future where countries are going to be moving that way. I mean, I know El Salvador is doing that. Bukele travels around to parts of Latin America and tries to help other countries here locally move the right direction, move the same direction as they have on Bitcoin. So we just need to accelerate that. We need a lot more of that. So I'd be looking forward to when members of Congress, other folks in government in the US are willing to collaborate across the aisle, or I would say across the pond, so to speak, in over the Atlantic and over the Pacific, with countries that are interested and lawmakers that are interested in moving the right direction on this technology.
Yeah, it seems like Elon Musk is looking at a playbook of Milei in Argentina.
Yeah, yeah.
So beyond pushing for laws to allow Bitcoin purchases, what other Bitcoin-related policies do you believe government should prioritize? Such as, like, I don't know, taxation, mining incentives, or Bitcoin payments?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of different policy verticals that you could focus on. Certainly taxation is one of them. We have, in the US at least, a problem, in my opinion, with taxation. I think that you can't really truly use Bitcoin as money when you have these very significant capital gains taxes every time you spend Bitcoin. And so figuring out a way to make that work for the future of Bitcoin in the US is going to be important. I think that starts at bare minimum with a de minimis exemption. So that means if I walk in and I buy $500, under $500 in groceries, then we shouldn't have this capital gains tax taking place. If people just want to buy a coffee, they just want to buy groceries, and eventually maybe just pay their rent, I think they should be able to do that without having to have this big, huge tax burden on them every single time they make a payment. And so that's one area that I think is important. Of course, protecting Bitcoin rights globally has been important for us. Specifically in the US, we've had a lot of success with that policy area. Strategic Bitcoin reserves, I think governments should have their own reserve of Bitcoin. And then again, what we talked about earlier with the pensions or some other way of making sure the individuals within the country truly benefit from the technology.
I think under like states which have like saying if you buy Bitcoin or you buy something with Bitcoin with up to $500, then it's tax-free. Like you don't have to worry about taxing. I think Wyoming or some state.
There have been efforts to attempt that. It hasn't gotten across the finish line. Senator Lummis was a big leader on this too. I think she even has it in one of her federal bills to create a de minimis exemption. So we would love to see more of that take place. We're trying to, there are state capital gains taxes in the US too as well. So we're trying to work in those states to create momentum around this idea. But ultimately we would need to pass a federal law to eliminate the capital gains taxes because that's predominantly where the majority of the capital gains taxes exist in the US.
No. I thought it's already there, but this is something I think we need in Germany too, because we have, yes, the 1 year holding period. After that, it's tax-free. But if you bought Bitcoin recently, so under 1 year, you have to tax it if the profit is more than €1,000 per year. That means like if you buy something, you have to write down when did you bought a Bitcoin, to which price, and did you sell it, what is the profit, and that's like really annoying. That hinders you to actually use Bitcoin as a means of payment. And I think this could be a first start to say like payments up to €1,000, you don't have to care about like taxation. It doesn't matter. Something like this, I think it would be a great policy. Hopefully it will be in the US. Hopefully we will achieve this in Germany. But I think that this could be a good start. But like looking on the long-term vision for Bitcoin in a political space, what do you see like they are becoming core political issues like climate change or foreign policy? What do you see like in the long game?
As far as for Bitcoin, I think that there is going to be, so right now we're in this environment where we're trying to decide, should we do Bitcoin or should we not do Bitcoin politically? But we're starting to shift away from that. And once we shift completely away from it, we're going to enter a world where it'll be more about how we should do Bitcoin. And so that's the environment I want us to be in. In that environment, we'll certainly have disagreements over how we should mine Bitcoin, right? Because there's going to be automatically in the US, of course, Republicans and Democrats have very different energy policies. It's probably one of the biggest differences between Republicans and Democrats here in America is that Republicans are all about all the above energy, just more energy. And Democrats, of course, are much more focused on clean energy, renewable energy. And so there is going to be a big split with Bitcoiners in the future over, should we just have policies that encourage Bitcoin mining to use clean energy, or should it be something that should be used as a broader technology? Because we, at Satoshi Action, we really see Bitcoin mining as a piece of energy infrastructure. We see it as a tool for energy systems, and regulators and policymakers, they're going to come up with different ways to use that tool, just like how we do with the internet, right? We have policies that surround the internet, and there is a division even between the parties over how we should advance the internet and its regulations. And I think that same exact thing is going to take place with any type of energy policy that could impact the climate.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to like normal Bitcoiners who want to influence their local politicians to support Bitcoin initiatives?
There's tons of ways that people can help to advance Bitcoin with their local lawmakers. The biggest one is just start writing emails, And also I tell people, assume that one day these people will be on your side. Always assume that one day, even the most anti-Bitcoin person could eventually become a pro-Bitcoin. It only takes, I think, one major event or one family member even sometimes coming in and saying, hey, you're getting this wrong. on Bitcoin, and this is why you need to understand it better. So I think when you engage lawmakers, whoever they are around the world, people need to assume that positive intent is there. So just be respectful, write kindly to your lawmakers, and let them know why you support Bitcoin and why you think it's important that they support Bitcoin. Additionally, I think you can ask for in-person meetings. I know governments are different all across the world, so access to lawmakers is probably different all across the world. But in the US at least, you can request meetings with your lawmakers, and you can go in and sit down with them as a constituent and tell them why you support Bitcoin. Not every lawmaker will do that. Some of them will ignore you, but you should at least try to make those attempts. And then beyond that, if you want to be able to help advance Bitcoin, I think it's very important that people realize that there is an economic factor to groups like yours and mine being able to be successful. And so I think people need to realize that if they truly want Bitcoin to be successful, they need to start funding these types of organizations that are fighting on their behalf to advance Bitcoin in those types of countries that they live in.
Yeah, in Germany it's the same. So you can go to your politician, you can call them, you can write them an email, and they will normally hear you out. Or you can join us, German Bitcoin Association. And you pre-wrote an email and put it on your website, and then you just have to put your contact details in there, and then you send it automatically to the corresponding politician. And I think it worked quite well, right?
It did. Actually, it was one of our most successful campaigns so far. We've done a few campaigns where we have advocates send out emails to their elected officials. And this recent email campaign, last I checked, 120,000 letters had been sent. So it's an incredible amount of letters. I think I was getting texts from lawmakers saying that their inboxes are exploding with these messages. I mean, 120,000 messages. There's not even that many lawmakers in the country. So that's a huge amount of emails going out. The number's probably even higher today. I only checked it yesterday. But yeah, it's a very powerful tool. I think people should look these tools up and try to use them. They can cost money too, though. That's what I'm saying. So this is why it's important to support German Bitcoin Association or Satoshi Action, because we have to spend money on these tools to be able to give advocates the ability to click a button and send an email versus looking up the email, looking up the lawmaker, writing your own letter. We do all of that for you. All you have to do with us is fill in that address and your email, and you can click it and send a letter right away.
Perfect. Finally, what's next for you and your work? Any exciting developments or announcements you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've probably shared them already a little bit, but revisiting strategic Bitcoin reserve policy, I've been able to get 10 lawmakers in 10 different states to be ready to introduce this legislation. We've already saw one take place in Pennsylvania, and then we're also working with international lawmakers. So we have 4 international lawmakers in 4 different countries who are also getting ready to introduce this type of legislation. So that is a big development. That is a big win for us. And we're just looking forward to seeing how far we can get with the current momentum that we have.
Okay, perfect. Anything you want to add? Anything we didn't cover?
No, but if people want to reach out, they can reach out to me. I'm on Twitter. I read all my DMs. It's at Dennis_Porter_, or they can reach out to our organization directly via email, and that's help@satoshiaction.io.
Perfect. Then, thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Until next time.
Wenn dir die Folge gefallen hat, freue ich mich, wenn du den Kanal abonnierst und der Folge einen Daumen nach oben gibst.